Hey, thank you guys for joining us today. I would love to start if each of you will share your names and share a little bit, maybe start out a little bit about your journey of how you came to choosing embryo adoption, and then we can talk more details about that.
I'm Desma.
I'm Chloe.
And I'm Lee.
And our journey to embryo adoption came through a channel of other adoptions. When we first got married, Lee and I had a plan. We thought we would have 6 biological children and 6 adopted children. And so we wanted to get started on that journey. But the biological did not happen for us. We were going through infertility treatment and had some miscarriages. So we started down the adoption path, and we adopted our first daughter domestically, and Lee delivered her actually. And then we did a foreign adoption with our oldest son, and then we did another foreign adoption, and that is how God gave us our twin girls. And then another foreign adoption, and that was our son from Vietnam. And then we thought we were pretty much done, and I'll let Lee talk about one of his medical magazines that he was reading, and how he came to learn about embryo adoption.
So I was reading in one of the medical journals. Actually, it was Christian Medical Dental Association, and they had an article which it kind of piqued my interest, and so I brought it to Desma's attention, as ultimately, it would be if she was interested in doing this, and she was. And so she contacted him and kind of explored that option. And why don't you go ahead from there?
Yeah, I had already asked after our 5th child, I had already asked Lee to put the crib away in the attic. And so when he read that article and told me about it, I had already settled in my mind. My prayer had been that, Lord, if I'm going to have another baby, I'm going to deliver that baby. And I thought, well, that's, short of a miracle, that's not going to happen. So when he brought that to my attention, I prayed about it, and I can't say I had a vision, but it truly just was right there. I knew that was what God wanted us to do. And so I was already 42 at the time, so we kind of needed to hurry. So that's how we came to embryo adoption, to begin that journey.
Talk with me a little bit, about the journey of being a recipient adoptive family as you started through that walk and making decisions such as, what type of donors you will choose and all that. So share with us a little bit about that.
As far as the adoption aspect of it, like Desma had said, we'd been through it with 5 other children. And so I guess I didn't see it as any different than just 9 months earlier with regard to the adoption aspect. With regard to picking the biological parents, there was some information provided regarding ethnicity, level of education, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think we had already come down that road of, oh my, we're not going to have a biological child. And I guess we had already gotten to the point that we felt like, it's not of ourselves. Children are a gift of God. No matter how they come to you, there was no contact with adoption agencies in the foreign countries or biological families. So for us, that really wasn't an important piece of this adoption process.
Can you share when your earliest memories are of learning about embryo adoption and that's how you were born?
Yeah. So I can't remember when I first was talked to about it, but I do remember, like, in my memories, like the first time I talked about it to somebody. And it was when I was, I think, about 7 years old. And I was with this other kid, and I was trying to tell him, like, everything, like, about my family and how I was an embryo adoption. And back then, like, I didn't really get the full, like, broad explanation of it. Like, I didn't really know how to explain it, so it was probably really confusing to those who were hearing me talk about it. But no, the earliest memory I have is when I was probably about 7, and I was playing outside with these other kids, and I was, like, trying to tell them about it and trying to explain it. And obviously they had questions, but I'd be like, well, I don't know. Like, that's what my parents told me. And so that's probably my earliest memory about it.
So I would love to talk about what the experience is like knowing you have anonymous donors that donated your embryo to the NEDC. And so talk with me about what you think about that, because that's a unique part of your story as well.
Well, I don't really know anything about them or anything about the biological aspect of them, but maybe one day I'll be a little bit more curious about it. But right now, I think that what I'm interested in knowing is basically, like, my ethnicity and my background, but not necessarily my biological family. Just sort of like what are my traits and characteristics, and, like, what countries, like, am I from and everything like that. But it's like, I think it's really cool to think, wow, there's people out there that did that, and, you know, maybe one day I want to see if, like, they're still out there. But at the moment, I'm just so perfectly happy with the family that I have, and I will always be perfectly happy with the family that I have. And so sometimes people will ask me about, like, oh, do you want to meet them someday? And I'm like, maybe, but not really to have, like, a really close relationship. But what I'm more interested in is my ethnicity and what's in my blood and everything like that. But that's pretty much it.
Okay, so Chloe just shared that she maybe one day is curious about searching for her donor or her genetic links. And as parents, what do you guys feel about that?
Why don't you tell about the experience with Timmy?
Okay. Well, through embryo adoption, I think if someday, Chloe would want to find out more biologically, I think that would be a good thing. Actually, our oldest daughter, a couple of years ago on Facebook, connected with her biological mother, and they now have a friendship. And our daughter is quick to say, hey, she's not mom and dad, but we do have a friendship. And I think there's a place for that. So I would say, don't be afraid of that at all.
My last question then is for Chloe. I would love for you to share what would you tell another kid that's born via embryo adoption? Is there any tips, advice you would give to them, maybe a younger kid that's growing up and figuring out their place in the world and maybe how they want to share it with their friends. What advice would you give to another child?
Well, if it was someone around my age, I would obviously be able to go more into detail with them. And I would try and like talk to them, like say, you are no different than anybody else. Like just because you may not have the biological aspects of your parents doesn't mean that you are not their child. And also that the way you came into the world is so special and so unique, and that they should really try and embrace that and not hide it all, but rather research it and look up different things about it so that they can talk to their friends, and that when they're talking to their friends, they could say, no, I don't have any of my parents' genes, but my mom carried me. And like it gets kind of confusing sometimes, but I would just try and talk to them and say, it is nothing, absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. You shouldn't feel different, and you shouldn't feel, well, because I don't have my parents' blood in my system, I am not their child, because that is definitely, most certainly not the case. It is rather the opposite of that, because you don't need blood to be family, and that's what that is. And even if the kid had siblings and they were all the parents' biological kids, if they had concerns about it, I would tell them, talk to your parents, because if your parents didn't want you in that family, they wouldn't have had you, and they wouldn't have gone through that process. And that's all you have to think of, like in that aspect of if a kid feels like, oh, well, those people didn't want me. It's like, maybe not, but they gave you a chance to be with these people who did, and they went through this whole entire thing just for you, and just so that you could have a chance at a life and a chance at a family. And that's basically like, for someone who can really try and understand all of that and who is raising a concern about it, that's what I would probably tell them.
Desmond and Lee, what about you guys? What advice would you give to couples starting the embryo adoption process?
I guess a couple of thoughts come to mind. One is the opportunity to adopt an embryo and then have the adoptive mother carry the baby and go through the whole experience of birth and everything after that is a real blessing. And we've done it from the point of birth, and we've done it after the birth, and it doesn't make a lot of difference ultimately how the child and the family comes together. We're all a family, and really we don't even think about it probably 95%, 99% of the time. But when we do think of it, we feel it's a real blessing, a real opportunity. And one other thing that for me kind of pointed towards doing the embryo adoption, because there's other adoption opportunities that we could have pursued at that point in time. But I like the idea of also being part of a solution. The fact that there was a lot of frozen embryos out there, and if nobody is willing to provide them an opportunity to enjoy life, they will disintegrate. They will, they'll disintegrate. So the opportunity to provide those embryos a chance to live, that they aren't just tissue, they're actually people. And we provide the opportunity, and if God blesses it, lo and behold, we have a child. Or a young adult.
Right. And I would say too, I think adoption in general, just remember, is not the consolation prize. Adoption is just another birth journey, and it may be the journey that, it was a journey we were meant to be on totally, and it may be a journey someone else is meant to be on totally. And embrace it. It's wonderful. And embryo adoption, oh my goodness. Carrying that baby and delivering that baby. Chloe told me not to cry, so I'm not going to. But I'm telling you, it is worth every step. And honestly, unless God closes that door and he locks that window, go for it.